and hello, enterprise techies, and welcome to our April New York Enterprise Tech Meetup. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Jessica Lynn. I'm a co-founder and general partner here at Workbench. We are an enterprise software VC fund based here in New York, and we invest in early stage startups throughout the country, leading $3 to $6 million seed rounds. Now, the number one thing we love working with our seed founders on is enterprise sales and go-to-market all day, every day. And this is why we are so thrilled to introduce our new event series, our Enterprise Operator Masterclass. We took a look at our Workbench community, which has operators from the fastest growing enterprise software companies, and realized how many incredible playbook pages these operators have and why we needed to bring them to our NYETM stage to share more. One of the most common questions we get from our enterprise founders is around demand gen and how exactly to go about building a campaign on a seed budget. And so we are beyond pumped to have with us today Andrew Racine, VP of Global Demand Gen at Fivetran, previously at MongoDB, Conjur, HubSpot, and also a unique and maybe rare colorblind marketer. Fivetran, as many of you know, is one of the country's most exciting companies in the automated data integration world, now valued at $5.6 billion. And we're so thrilled to have Andrew share his playbook of demand gen tactics that scale. As a reminder, please tweet away, tweet often with our hashtag NYTM. You can also view all videos from past meetups on the Workbench YouTube page, including today's sessions, and we'll leave plenty of time for audience Q&A. So throw your questions into chat throughout. And with that, please join me in welcoming Andrew Racine.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Kira. Appreciate the intro. Glad everyone enjoyed the intro music. And I didn't know they were playing in NYC this weekend. So bonus points there. Let me share my screen. And Jessica, I'll rely on you to give me a thumbs up if you can see it properly.
You look great.
All right. So hey, everyone, thanks for joining us today. Really excited to be here. A little bit about me. As Jessica said, I've been in demand gen for a little bit, had the opportunity and been really fortunate to work at some amazing companies. Learned a lot along the way. What you won't see in the slider logos is actually where I got my start, which was the newspaper industry. Not a lot of demand gen going there, not a lot of hyper growth. Luckily, I saw the light. I went back to school, got my MBA, and read a case study about this little company out of Boston called HubSpot, and realized they seem to know a lot more about demand, about marketing than what I was learning in school. That kind of set me on this trajectory to where I am now, which is at Fivetran. Been here for a little over 2 years, seen amazing growth. As you can read here, we just raised our Series D, acquired a company called HBR, and have seen some amazing growth along the way. And then just a little bit about me. I'm originally from Vermont, was in Boston for about 20 years or so, and recently just moved out here to California last summer. So enjoying the weather here. Didn't miss those New England winters, but definitely need some East Coast in my life sometime soon. So today's topic, how to launch a demand gen campaign and program on a seed dime for the biggest impact. A lot of misconceptions about demand gen, a lot of things being written about, a lot of theories, a lot of hacks. Hopefully I'm just going to instill some really tangible tactics and strategies that you can employ today to try and build that predictable, scalable, repeatable demand gen function. I think a lot of times we look for the quick wins, or we expect campaigns in itself to just set the world on fire, so to speak, and to light up your leads for your sellers. It's really not the case from my experience. A lot of little things that contribute and compound over time can predict that scalable model. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of those tactics today. Additionally, we're going to talk about specific campaigns, how we prioritize, what I've spent time on, especially like coming into Fivetran, where we didn't have a lot of formal demand gen when I joined. What were some of the first tactics that we employed to get the ball moving? We have to think about budget, right? We're not assuming that anyone here has infinite budget. Even with that funding round, I do not have an infinite budget. And so how do we use it to our advantage? How do we measure it along the way? What are the things that we look for in terms of being able to understand what's working, what's not working, what we should invest more in, what we should invest less in? How to test campaigns, and then just some general learning. So if everyone's good with that agenda, let's get into it. So like I said, I joined Fivetran a couple of years ago. This was late 2019, just before COVID. We had some really good generalist type marketers that were keeping the lights on, and we're doing things like a blog and a website and some emailing. But it was pretty early days, even at that point, in terms of a structured approach where we could predictably generate enough demand to make sure our sellers were hitting their quotas. On top of that, we had a really small database, not a lot of emails in our CRM. Virtually no top of funnel. So you'll see tofu, you'll see mofu in here. Tofu I refer to as top of funnel, mofu middle of the funnel, stole that from HubSpot. But we didn't have any top of funnel. It was really like we were hoping that people would sign up for a trial or a demo. And I think one of the key things you have to keep in mind is not everyone's going to be ready for that. Actually, most people are not going to be ready for those hand-raising actions to say, hey, I'm ready to try this out. It's going to take a lot more time, a lot more resources, a lot more trust in your brand and your product before people are ready for that. To make things even more interesting, we had this quasi ABM motion that was going on, which was ironic because we were really trying to market to SMB and mid-market companies that usually perform much more like a velocity model, where it's just like, let's get as many people in as possible, get them to try it out, and then convert them along the way. This ABM approach was targeting the right accounts, but not really personalizing it. And we really had like a one size fits all. If you were coming to the Fivetran website, we were going to treat everyone the exact same. And what's ironic is that we really market to one-person startups to Fortune 100 companies. And so how did we actually differentiate and start to personalize that so that when someone came to our website, someone engaged with our campaigns, they actually felt like we got them. We understood them and their position and their role at their stage of the company. So after kind of the before and after, we really feel like we're still improving. We do not have this all figured out. So I'll just put that out there right now. There's still a lot of work to be done. But we made some improvements. We made some progress along the way. Namely, just having clear entry points into top of funnel. Do we know the problems, the questions, the challenges that our prospects have that can get them into our database, that can get them into our programs, even if they're not ready to try Fivetran, even if they don't really know who we are yet. But they have a problem, they're trying to answer it, and we can be the one that helps them. How can we lend predictability and scalability to it? Again, you don't want your lead chart to look like peaks and valleys, a bunch of spikes every time you send an email, then a bunch of nothing when you're not. How do you get that clear compounding line graph up and to the right that we all love, so that you're not dependent on one action to rule them all? How do you link top of funnel with middle of funnel? That's an important place. Again, knowing that people take time, there's a journey there. How do you do that in an effective way so that they have as much context as possible? Speaking of context, I think what we've learned here at Fivetran and other roles is that if your sales team isn't excited about this campaign, you can't really expect your prospects to. So it's as important to get your sales team bought in on these leads, these programs, these campaigns, so that they do follow up with them. They are excited about them. They treat the leads like hot leads, like this is way better than outbounding all day. But without that context, without the enablement, you're not really giving them a chance to succeed. And then all this is just for reliable pipeline. I can, in most of our segments, in most regions at this point, be able to say, okay, if we invest this much in these types of tactics, we should be able to provide this type of pipeline for each of our sales groups. And that's really the ultimate goal. You just want to make this a math problem. You don't want to have to play catch up or guess what's going to work this month or this quarter. You want to have a bunch of things in motion that are scaling and that you're able to prove that they're working, so that you can really optimize, and then you can invest in things that are more innovative. You can do experiments. But without that reliability, especially in the top of funnel, which is where a lot of this conversation will go today, it's really difficult to do. All right. So how do we build demand gen at Fivetran? We started simple. I came in, like I mentioned, there wasn't a lot of organization. But we had started writing a blog post. I think blogs are still, in this day and age, with growth hacking and everything else, PLG, ABM, all the buzzwords, I still think blog posts are an amazing source and can differentiate you from the crowd, especially if they deal with helping people, helping your target audience answer the questions. People still will Google everything. People still like to read and research their problems, find solutions that they're trying to help move their business forward. And so blog posts are a great way to do that. I think the one caveat that you'll want to know is that early on, sometimes I've seen companies try to over-rotate and optimize all their blog posts and really do it from an SEO perspective first. It's a long game. It's tough to see those SEO improvements or that SEO focus really start to make an impact early on. It could take months, if not years, to see that. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but really write for that audience first, I think is first and foremost. And so what I did when I first joined was like, okay, what are our blog posts that are actually resonating with our audience? Do they even have to deal with Fivetran? Hopefully not, actually. Hopefully they're just focused on the problems and challenges that our target audience is asking, and hopefully we're the ones serving them up. But it's not enough just to rely on like organic search as a way to get found. You really need to promote these articles where your audience lives. And so understanding not only what questions they have, what challenges they have, but where they live, so to speak, online, where they get their information, where they do their research, what communities they talk to their colleagues on. That's going to be your biggest play, because we can synthesize demand gen down into basic fundamentals of you have a target audience that has problems or challenges that you can figure out where they're asking these or where they're researching these problems, and then serve them up the content to get the ball rolling. Again, this isn't going to translate into a bunch of trials or demos. This is going to start to populate the database and start to get eyeballs on your website and on your content assets. And without that, it's going to be with that, it's actually going to be much easier to propel them into that trial or that demo stage that you want them in. So analyze which blog articles are getting the most hits, the most shares, the most traffic, whether that be organic or paid. And I do think it's important to spend some money. I know we're talking seed stage startups here, but again, if you're not able to properly distribute your great content, it's almost like the billboard in the middle of the desert. Wow, look at this amazing billboard. It answers all of my target audience questions. Unfortunately, no one can see it. No one can find it. So you need to put a little bit of juice, so to speak, into your promotion, which is really what demand gen comes down to, right? Are you able to serve up the right message, the right content at the right time to the right person, so that it helps them, it moves them closer to evaluating your product and getting into an opportunity and potentially buying. And so some early things that we did to speed this process up, because you can't always wait for this amazing ebook or white paper or case study anthology to be created. Sometimes you just have to repurpose things, and that's one of my favorite activities. And something we do today still at Fivetran that we did when I first joined was, what is working? What are similar themes? And can we just combine them into some downloadable assets and then promote them in other places besides our website? We were very mindful. Our traffic was pretty modest back then. It still is, because there's only so many people that are going to be looking for automated data integration. But we figured out where they were living, where they were spending time, and we served up these downloadable assets as a way to, again, promote thought leadership, teach people, help people. It was not to sell them, and very few of them were even talked about Fivetran. One of our biggest channels was LinkedIn, still is. Happens to be a really accurate CRM, so to speak, where everyone actually willingly puts in their title in their company and when they get a promotion and where they are based and what companies they follow and what skills they have. Makes targeting and audience building really easy. We partner with a vendor called Metadata, who some of you may know, and they really help us scale it. Their tool plugs into our LinkedIn, our Facebook, our Quora accounts, and actually enables us to test out, build audiences, and then test out a bunch of different creatives at scale. And so we were able to learn really quickly what's working, what's not. We can create our audiences with more granularity. We can serve up a bunch of different assets and creatives for those assets. And believe me, you can see this image. We did not have a design team at that point. It was literally us going into Canva, having one template, changing some header language, changing the call to action, changing some colors, loading it all into metadata. With their help, they have great customer success. So it was almost like an extension of our team, and was able to scale this out and start to get that motion going. We weren't even bringing people to our website. We were using lead gen forms on LinkedIn, and so people could download the asset and continue what they were doing. We'd email it to them. So a great way to get some early signal on what's working, if your content is resonating with folks, and to get email addresses, more importantly. Got to get that database going. I think we didn't do this right off the bat, but something that we followed quickly on in terms of paid syndication is content syndication. We partner with a company called Integrate. When you have these assets, when you have these downloadable items, you can pay for leads, basically. You can pick your title, you can pick your industries, you can pick your geos, you can pick what technologies they use. And so it's not enough to expect everyone to find you. You need to be proactive as well in demand gen. And so by picking the right type of people, paying a fee for each lead, but then getting them into your database, getting them into nurture programs. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. That again will give you that top of funnel scale. Start making it a math problem. I've seen too many companies who try to boil the ocean in the middle of funnel, where you're dealing with a small number of kind of unqualified leads and expecting them to all convert into qualified. It's not that easy, especially in early days. You need to fill that top of funnel as quickly as possible with as many people as possible, so that you can start to sort through who your best prospects are and who aren't, and know that it is a numbers game in the end that will pay dividends over the course of the year, couple of years, if you're doing it the right way. Checking time. All right, I think we're good. So here's some other specific tactics that I think you should all consider. Nurture programs, basically email programs that are linked to that top of funnel conversion or that problem or that challenge that your prospect faced that initially got them into your database. And so giving them a greatest hits, additional blog posts, webinars, case studies, anything that builds upon that use case, that initial question that they had, but that gradually brings them to wanting to do one of those more high intent activities, like signing up for a trial or a demo or whatever your kind of bottom of funnel offer is. And then implementing a simple lead score as well. This is a nice to have, right? You might not have marketing ops yet. You might. It wouldn't be a bad early investment, in my opinion. I was lucky at Fivetran to partner with a couple people who really helped me cobble some of this together, and so that we could bring more rigor and more measurement to figure out what was working faster. One of the things we did was we just implemented a super easy and simple behavior-based lead scoring. We assigned points. You get 20 points to be a marketing qualified lead. This for us was when someone was more than likely ready for a sales conversation. There's a couple ways you could automatically MQL by raising your hand and going to a demo or trial. And there are other ways that you could engage over time, like downloading content, attending a webinar, things of that nature, field events that would accumulate points and eventually have you MQL. But we made it super easy to MQL. We did not want to have this really high bar in the early days. We wanted to give our reps as many at-bats, so to speak, as possible, so that they could tell us what was good and what was bad, so that we could then feed that back into our campaigns and say, wow, these leads were terrible. Although they all asked for demos, they really just wanted something else completely. Let's stop feeding the funnel with those folks, and let's actually lean into these MQLs that have a high conversion rate, that are converting down the funnel. And so a lead score, super simple one, will give everyone, make sure everyone's on the same page, and also incent the marketers to do the right type of campaigns, not just the ones that bring in the most people. It's a fine line, quality and quantity. Some of the things specifically that I would measure in early days is very basic funnel metrics, like how many leads are you coming in? The lead conversions, these aren't MQLs, these are just people who see enough value in what you're offering to give you their information. It's not insignificant. Sometimes we go too far, in my opinion, to rate to MQLs, but just how many net new leads are seeing value in what you're delivering to the market. Your conversion rates, the number of net new leads. Now you're going to start to have leads that convert over and over again, but it's important to know that like 25% of that database is going to be absolutely irrelevant in a year's time. And so what are you doing to fill that top of funnel with net new leads constantly to exceed that 25% that you know you're going to lose? MQLs, we talked about that, marketing qualified leads. And then it's really shifting from the individual person to the account or to the opportunities. And so I think it's important to measure how many of your MQLs end up in a new opportunity or a meetings booked. Not necessarily a qualified one, but someone said, hey, yeah, I did sign for a demo. I'd like to talk more about it. And then how many of those new opportunities or meetings booked end up in pipeline? At Fivetran, we have kind of two different stages for those opportunities. We have something called a stage 0, which is like just a new meeting is booked. It's been accepted by a prospect. It's going to happen, or it did happen. And then a sales qualified op, and what we consider pipeline is when an AE has been able to qualify during that intro call, make sure that there is a use case that's relevant to us, how we can actually help them, and that it's a real thing, not just someone applying for a job or a competitor trying to see our tech. So that's a really important one. And then obviously pipeline to close one. Now in our sales playbook, we have stages between pipeline, close one revenue, but from the demand gen perspective, that's really what we look at, is from like that pipeline, that stage 1 to close 1. All right, and then you built this program, this demand gen program. You have top of funnel coming in. You're linking it with nurture programs, chats. I forgot to mention that. Other display ads, things that are just reinforcing the brand, reinforcing the fact that that initial conversion was helpful, hopefully to that prospect. Now, how do you get everyone else on board? I think one of the biggest things I learned in my career is just that enablement of sales and of ops and of leadership and of customer success and anyone who will listen. Again, it's not enough to get your prospects excited about something. What happens afterwards? Our job in demand gen doesn't stop when we create an MQL. It actually gets more important that we see it through the whole way. And so one of the things we did with some of our early assets that we created was on our internal wiki, we just created a resource center so that reps could see what we were promoting, what was converting. They could see the landing page, they could read the asset, they could see all the leads in Salesforce coming in. We even provide just a paragraph snippet for their sales loft cadences, so that if they were following up, they'd have everything they needed to utilize the context and the why and the when that someone converted on it. And so that our theory and the hypothesis was, if we enable them on that, they'll be excited about it. They'll have everything they need. That follow-up will be so much more on point. It won't just be generic, it'll be personalized. And in this day and age, when we all probably get 1 million automated, non-personalized sales cadences a day, that little personalization and a little bit of context goes a long ways. So we wanted that from the start, and that just builds great momentum, kind of great first principles around inbound follow-up in general. That really helped us out early days. Like I said, give your reps as many at-bats. Don't make that lead score so prohibitive that like people have to raise their hand every single time with a trial or demo. Give them a larger sample size. Webinar leads can be really interesting. Ebook leads can be really interesting. Personal email addresses can be really interesting. We found a lot of gold in those, CTOs and CEOs and other decision makers that maybe aren't using their personal email address, but don't try and downplay that score too much. Early days, you just want that sample size. You want those conversion percentages. You want to see what's working, what's not, so that you're going to iterate on this lead score, on this process, probably twice a year, maybe even 4 times a year, if you have enough leads. And so make sure you're giving your reps enough at bats so you can have that significant sample size, so that when you do go and make those changes, it's based on some really legit data. And then obviously just invest more time and budget into what's working. You'll start to have that feedback loop. You'll start to get that qualitative and quantitative feedback from the sales reps. That's when it gets fun. That's when you can start to place some more strategic bets. That's where you can make the case to invest more money, turn off some things, which is as liberating as anything. You don't feel like you have to do all the things. One thing I've learned is that usually it'll be just a couple channels that really work for you and that provide that predictability and that scalability. don't think you have to do everything. It's impossible, actually, and you'll spread yourself too thin. Really lean in on what's working, but leveraging the data not only from your MQL conversions, but that sales progress too. Again, it doesn't end when you create that MQL. It ends when the MQL is either revenue or unqualified. That's the best data points we can operate on. All right, how are we doing on time? 10:30, cool. So yeah, cool. You have a question?
Just that you're doing great on time.
All right, thank you. All right, some of my biggest lessons learned, I've hinted at a few of these, but ones that I think everyone should consider as you're building out your demand gen programs is the do's. We'll start with the do's. Definitely set monthly goals, even if they're just a number of net new leads, even if it's just a number of downloads, even if it's the number of visits. There can be some vanity metrics in there. Early days, that's fine. I think just the idea of setting a goal, getting your team to focus a set of efforts to hit that goal or exceed it, and then retroactively seeing how you did is one of the most important muscles you can build. And so even if you don't have MQL or pipeline goals yet from a demand gen perspective, set something, knowing that eventually if you can hit that predictably, then that's when you have MQL goals. Then that's when you'll have meetings book goals. Then you'll have pipeline goals. Then you'll have revenue goals. But know that it's really difficult to go from not much of a top of funnel to like a revenue goal. It's too big of an ocean to boil, so to speak. And so make it more manageable. Ship early and often. It's definitely a mantra of our team. We're not trying to create these campaigns that take months and months and months to create, and then we have the big reveal, and then it either lands flat or it sets the world on fire. It's a tough way to go. You're just not getting enough data. You're not trying enough things, in my opinion, to learn quickly, especially when you're trying to set that motion. And so just ship often. Early days, our goal was just to ship something new by each of our campaign marketers every week. When I started, it was just me and one person at Fivetran doing demand gen. And so we were shipping daily, oftentimes more than one. And again, this might just be an email. It might be an ad. It might be a new content piece. It might be a new tool that you implement. But get that momentum going. You have that momentum of shipping often and learning. You have those monthly goals. It makes it that much more easy to scale. I hinted at this before, invest in marketing ops. Marketing ops, a lot of what we do in demand gen at this scale and even a couple of years ago is impossible without sound marketing ops. These folks are the ones behind the scenes that are integrating your tools or using your marketing automation setup. They're linking that to your ads, to your CRM. They're the one helping making sure that all of our data points are ready so that our analytics team can visualize these things. It is, I don't know if it's underrated at this point, but if you're not thinking about investing early in marketing ops, I would just say reconsider. You'll even find, I've worked with some great marketing ops folks who kind of straddle the line between marketing ops and demand gen. They maybe had a past in doing a little bit of both at a smaller startup. And if you have the right tools, you might not need a full-on dedicated marketing ops person. HubSpot, I think, does a really good job of, you didn't really need one early days. Metadata is another great example. You don't really need one. You have teammates at these vendors that can actually function as in those roles. But if you're getting more sophisticated, you want that more granularity, invest in marketing ops early. We talked about the clear funnel stages. Make it manageable. Don't go from new lead to revenue. Make sure you have stages along the way so that when you do have this funnel, you can see where things are getting stuck. You'll be able to see if your new leads are converting MQLs. You'll be able to see if your MQLs are being followed up with. You can see if your MQLs are being followed up with, why or why not are they ending up in meetings and so on. So just make it a math problem, figure out those stages, even if it's not perfect. I think it's just better to be consistently measuring that type of model rather than constantly tinkering. And then, understand that your best campaign will be the one that sales most and excited about. Marketing, we talk a lot about it. I talk a lot about it. It's not our job just to get the market excited. You got to get your internal folks excited about it too. And if you can do that, you're just going to see those conversion percentages go way up. So some of the don'ts, don't assume the market cares. That's always a difficult one. We think we have this great idea, this great message, this great content. I always tell the team, like, don't assume that anyone cares about this email, this ad, this new promotion. If you operate that way, I think it actually will make the demand gen marketer work harder to make sure people do care, both internally and externally. So it's not just a tactic of we are going to send this email, we are going to ship this campaign. It's like, no, there's going to be a lot more thought into it because we're assuming no one cares. It's a way better place to operate than assuming that if you launch it, they will come. Never usually works that way. Still doesn't. Benchmarks, I think they're okay to get started, but you really want to start to create your own. And that's a lot of what I talked about in the previous slides. Just make sure you have the operations in place that you can start measuring it. Every company is different, every segment, every region is so different in terms of how much it costs and how high your conversion rates and their market awareness and their need and their sophistication level. I'm a big believer in just setting your own benchmarks. So that's why you want that top of funnel firing on all cylinders early, so you can get that sample size, make your own, and then figure out where you can improve along the way. We talked about this, throw MQLs over the wall is a no-no. I really want every single demand gen marketer on my team to feel the onus of delivering quality leads and getting that feedback from their sellers, enabling them on the campaigns, and then iterating on their campaigns afterwards. We are not doing this for marketing's sake. We are measured by pipeline, and that's based on quality interactions with our campaigns. And I think that's something I didn't mention, but having your demand gen team early on be measured by the number of pipeline opportunities they're able to influence is really important. Because I've been in situations where marketing's celebrating because we generated a bunch of MQLs, and you ask sales, they're like, "No, actually, I didn't work any of those. It wasn't all that exciting." So it's like, what are we celebrating for? The purpose of this is not to hit marketing goals for the sake of marketing goals, to generate pipeline, generate revenue. Also talked about this. Don't wait until a prospect raises their hand. This was the thing that I saw at Fivetran when I joined. Is like we just were like, people are going to sign up for that trial and demo. They're ready. Don't assume anyone's ready. Assume actually that most people aren't ready. I read a great article about this concept of brand salience. It's like, how do you market to people who could be a good fit for your product, but aren't in the market right now? How do you talk to them? How do you make them understand who you are? So that when their time is right, when they do have that need, they automatically think of you. I think that's a big principle behind some of this top of funnel motion is like, don't go in for the sale, don't go in it for your sales pitch. Just start to get them in, and then you can be in control of that messaging and how they learn about your space and your product. And you're in control of it. You're not just hoping that they Google this or that or see this ad. They got in your database early. You're feeding them your greatest hits on what you know converts and what should align with their challenges. And that's a great way to bring people through in a non-aggressive but targeted way. And I talked on this early too, like don't rely on SEO early. It's a long play. Always be thinking about it with your content, optimize it, build themes in, categorize around certain elements that you want to win, but know that's a long game. And especially in the early days, you just don't want to rely on that because it won't let you hit your goals fast enough. You'll be waiting for that big change in Google that all of a sudden sends a bunch of traffic your way. Always be optimizing for it, but early days, I think it's worth paying in strategic places that you know your audience lives and communicates. All right, last ones. All right, I think we're good. Yeah, so just some miscellaneous things. I think hiring marketing generalists early is really important. They can be your ops person, they could be your ad person, they could be your email person, they could be your content person. Someone who thrives in that environment. That's certainly how Fivetran built it, and I've seen it at other companies, and it's a great way where you can wear many hats, ship a bunch of things, have fully integrated campaigns, but not necessarily need a specialist for each one. Now, there's drawbacks with that, but you can't go deep into the channels that you know are working, and I think that's the important pivot point that you'll want to consider is when you do start to find things that are working and you want to invest more on it, that's when you can start to bring in more specialists. Maybe you bring in your AdWords person or your email marketer or your chatbot expert. So you can specialize to scale. You've had enough of a sample size to figure out what's working. You have a great team that's able to go shallow in a lot of different things. Important then to start specializing in those channels, in those tactics, in those strategies that you've seen early returns on. Always know paid advertising is a tax for average content in marketing. It's tough. There's so many people doing content marketing now, trying to create that inbound demand gen flow. it's really competitive, but use that as an opportunity. Again, don't assume anyone cares. Go above and beyond to understand your target audience and market to them in a way that's helpful and useful and helps them progress in their career and solve the problems that they're faced with. You won't have to actually spend all that much on advertising if you can do that, but it's really hard. And every market's different. Just because paid advertising is a tax doesn't mean you should do it, but just view it that way. It doesn't have to be the only way you scale, but it can be in early days just to get some initial traction. Co-marketing, I think, is a great hack, if you want to call it that. It can always be difficult, but partners, if they're a good fit in your space, they always need content too. They always want speakers for webinars. They always want to do some co-marketing. And if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, so to speak. We're lucky at Fivetran. We have some amazing partners with like Snowflake and with some of the BI tools, Databricks. And we're always trying to leverage there. They have such bigger audiences, bigger sales teams, bigger marketing budgets, bigger databases. How can you leverage what they're doing and what they've done already? How can you position what you can offer in a unique way that actually gets their attention? That really helped us early days, is making those partnerships, providing value for them, and really making it fun to work with us and enjoyable. And then, the sad but true reality is that the market perception of your product is reality. And so sometimes I feel like as marketers, we could be very close, too close to our marketing, to our product, to our demand gen tactics, that we're not actually understanding the market's perception of it, which is all that matters. And so by getting some of those early data points, by getting both the qualitative and quantitative feedback you need from your sellers who are on the front lines, have a realistic and useful image of what your brand is actually like in the market. You can influence it, and you should be, but perception is definitely reality, and it's important to understand that so that you can feed that back into your proactive demand gen tactics to influence what that perception is. And if you can do that, you really stand a chance of changing the perception, influencing it, but also being realistic as to where you're at right now and what's going to be the best set of tactics for you to scale this thing. That was a lot, but that's what I have. Hopefully it was helpful, but happy to take any questions that the audience has.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew, for being so open about everything you've learned on your journey, and being so tactical and just keeping it so real with us. Our chat is lit right now, and we have some great questions. So let me try and pull up some of the ones that I think is going to resonate with a lot of folks. So here's one, which is from Amal. How do you differentiate the quality of leads in your top of funnel? What tactics did you use, and how did you create categories based on quality for sales teams to focus on? And you did touch on quality versus quantity, but if you could double click there.
Yeah, it's something we're always iterating on. And I've been proved wrong many times where I'm like, oh, this campaign or this asset, this offer is going to just bring in the most quality leads possible. And so that's why I think just giving yourself as many entry points into that funnel is the most important thing, because there's no one size fits all. We at Fivetran market to some very distinct personas. We have data engineers and data analysts, as well as kind of the line of business folks. And so spending the time to understand them and what their challenges are, and how they could be involved in the sales process, I think is the most important thing. A lot of times it'll be a committee that are involved in buying it, or sometimes it's just a CEO. Understanding your segments and your personas and how they differ, I think is the most important thing to start with. And then if you can have those ideas in place, you can start to serve them up things, content, campaigns, ads, events that speak to those hypotheses that you have. And you'll see, are they engaging? Are they converting? Do they see enough value in what you're giving you to give you their email address, to give you their real email address, to take a call? A lot of those data points are the ones that will feed back into that quality score. And that's what we'll ultimately put into our lead score. Say, wow, this webinar, it only had 50 people on it, but my goodness, every single one of them raised their hand immediately afterwards is involved in an opportunity. There's something there. And so to answer your question, there's no exact science. It's always a balance of quantity and quality. I'll just say, give yourself enough top of funnel options and experiments to make some really sound decisions based on the persona and the company that you're marketing to.
Awesome. Here's another one, which we hear a lot from our companies, which is what are some of the top KPIs for the demand gen function, right? I think it's very easy to just say, hey, it's MQLs, it's one certain number. Curious how you think about success.
Yeah, for us, it's getting more and more granular, but I'd say from a reasonable level where we feel really sound about the data, it's just visits. Just visits, not something that we spend a lot of time talking about. We need to show that we're driving more people to our assets, and the right type of people, not just more people, but the right type of people. That shows up in the lead conversions. So leads giving us information because we're being helpful. The new leads I mentioned, and then how many of those new leads actually end up as marketing qualified leads. They've done enough where statistically they should be more than likely ready for a sales conversation. We measure that based on the number of sales conversations that happen. And then out of those sales conversations, how many of those conversations were good that our sales reps actually want to spend more time with? That's when we get into that sales qualified opportunity. And then from there, it's really off to the races to revenue. But for demand gen, we'll look at visits, leads, MQLs, meetings booked, and sales qualified opportunities. That one being our North Star. Because again, we don't want to be throwing over a bunch of MQLs for the sake of it. We want to make sure that our MQLs are converting. And so I think that's been an important decision that the company made early on that really has helped us drive quality, but keep our eye on the quantity because we've been hiring a lot of sales reps and we have a lot of mouths to feed.
That's a great transition to this question, which is how do you work in tandem with the sales and go-to-market team to ensure that demand gen is growing proportionally with the number of sales reps to support the additional AE headcount as the business grows and scales?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It is tricky, I'll say. And then once a year, you have all these new sales reps and then you assign new territories. And all of a sudden, everyone's patch gets a little bit smaller. And someone who maybe got 100 inbound leads a month now gets 10. And so really, the way I work with sales is we're really moving towards almost like we are moving to like a rep by rep basis. We still have some work to do, but we understand that everyone's patch is different. If you're on the coast, for example, at Fivetran, you're just inherently going to get more inbound leads. Where there are pockets of the southeast or the middle of the country where there's just not as much inbound demand. And so how as a go-to-market team do we structure our actions to make sure that those reps that don't get inherently as much inbound have enough pipeline? And so it's really prescribing like the right mix of inbound, outbound, and partner activity for each rep, for each territory, that we're able to say and set expectations and say, listen, if you're in the Bay, you're going to get this many inbound leads. We need to expect those to convert. And that's probably going to be one of your best ways to get to your number. Whereas if you're in a different part of the country, you're expected to outbound and set those expectations right away and say, we're going to do some things. We're going to partner. We're going to put more spend or more focus on these, but it doesn't always matter. Demand is, the funny thing about demand gen, it's like it's creating it, but it's also just capitalizing on where the demand is. And so sometimes it's just not there. And whatever you do, you can spend a lot of money, it's just not there. And so set it proper expectations of saying, you're going to outbound. Tell us how we can help with that. And that's what's been really awesome, is to be able to figure out how we can make our outbound sellers more effective without getting any credit, without getting any sort of attribution. But maybe it's just giving them more context, it's giving them more content, it's giving them more ideas that we're rolling out in an automated fashion that they could employ from an outbound standpoint to start building their own funnel.
Great. And we have a great question here from Kate, which is asking, so most immature marketing teams do first and last touch attribution and miss the influence of the in-between to show pipeline influence. How do you measure these middle engagement points? And really, how do you show marketing influence pipeline? What data points do you use? I know this is something a lot of our companies think about.
Oh, attribution. Yes. I mean,
the whole talk touches on that.
Yeah. Let's level set that. Yeah, marketing attribution is something that marketers made up, right? So you can have a seat at the table. And that's good. We have to. And it's never perfect. I'll be very transparent at Fivetran. We look at it from a last touch perspective. It doesn't begin to visualize the impact that a lot of our efforts are doing. But we are working actually right now to build out a multi-touch attribution model to better understand our top of funnel, those initial entry points. I think that's the biggest thing. We just, a little while ago, we signed on with Visible. And so what we hope to do with that is be able to clearly mark the first touch someone engages at Fivetran, a lead convert, where they converted, what was the thing that got them to give us information? And then what was the thing last touch wise that happened right before their opportunity was created? Whether it was marketing, whether it was sales, whether it was partner activity. And it's not gonna be perfect, but at least it'll start to give us a little bit more visibility into that journey. Whereas last touch, you can expect it. It's like, oh, wow, look at all the trials and demo requests from marketing are really leading to a lot of pipeline. Well, yeah, not surprising. Those are people who are ready. But how do we get more of those folks that end up in that trial or demo first off? Or how do we get more people into that stage quicker? Those are the types of questions we're asking. There's been a lot of cobbling things together with our own data, but we're excited about having some of that touch point data in the future to start to visualize that for the whole company so people understand it. But it's something that you'll never fix. I think it's, again, in the spirit of it's better to just be consistent than perfect. And so even if it's the last touch and you're missing out on the whole first touch, that's okay. Just be consistent about it. Show that month over month growth. Figure out how you can influence that so that people will trust what you're doing, knowing that there's a bigger story, a broader story at play that you might just have to tell internally to your team to keep them rallied. That's something we've definitely dealt with at Fivetran, is like, okay, we understand you're doing all these things. You might not get credit for them, but it's bigger than that. But I think making strides quarter over quarter to provide that visibility is really important, however you do it.
Appreciate you keeping it real on that. And I'll end on one last question again for a lot of our seed companies as they're hiring out their first marketing hires. Do you optimize for our marketing experience or versus industry experience, particularly for a technical product like Fivetran? How you think about, especially the early marketing team?
Yeah, it's a fine line. In demand gen, we tend to rely less on industry or technical abilities. A lot of that, we have a great enablement program that can bring people up to speed pretty quickly. We're interested more in like the tactics and the strategies employed to speak to that audience. And I think we are lucky too that we have great product marketers who we rely on quite extensively on more of the industry and technical experience. Now, early days, if you can find that unicorn that is really well versed in your industry and loves to geek out on demand gen and maybe a little bit of marketing ops, yeah, pay them whatever it takes to get them in, because that is a unicorn. That is really hard to find. But know that like a lot of stuff is teachable. And so either whether people are really well versed in the industry and don't have the tactics in there, that's all teachable. These tools are so easy to use now. Or vice versa, if they're really good at that and they just need to be brought up to speed on the industry. I'd say it's really difficult to find the perfect person, but make sure you have the infrastructure in place to get them up to speed where they lack experience. That more than anything is going to make them even more productive, and then help them hire their next set of people based on their deficiencies, but at least they'll know what they are, and it helps you scale that way.
Okay, one last one, because I do think Brad snuck one in, and I think this is like the existential question that so many of our teams face, which is demand gen takes time to build. You shared that so beautifully in your presentation. How do you manage expectations of management who want to see short-term movement at the bottom of the funnel?
Yeah, it's a really tough thing. That's why setting up those different stages, I think, is really important. If you're waiting to see that movement on the bottom of the funnel, you're too late. You need to bring them along that journey. That's where the enablement and the visibility comes in. We have this optional monthly thing called the highlight zone at Fivetran that we created to give people an opportunity to share some of the inner workings of these experiments and these projects and these campaigns, so that everyone can see it. We record it and send it all around. And because that doesn't always show up on our funnel meetings or on our exec dashboards, but it's just being really transparent in that you're working on it. Here's the metric I'm trying to fix right now, which is a leading indicator to all these other things. This is where we see the problem, and just communicating that. And then having a plan to get them to that metric that your executives care about. It's one thing to say, hey, I'm working on this, we'll get to that later, but if you do get to that number, then how are you gonna get that person to the next one? But much easier to do if you chop it up into multiple stages.
Okay.